The dirt under Helena Foster's knees had long since stopped feeling uncomfortable, but the shame burning in her chest as she knelt before the wagon master remained as fresh as it had been an hour ago. She'd begged, pleaded, and offered every last coin sewn into the lining of her worn traveling dress, but Samuel Hutchins just kept shaking his head, his weathered face set in stone as he repeated the same words he'd given her when she first approached his westward-bound wagon train in Galesburg, Illinois, that spring morning of 1878. "I cannot take a woman traveling alone," he said again, softer this time but no less firm. "It would not be proper, Miss Foster. You need family, a husband, someone to vouch for you and care for you on the journey." "I can work," Helena insisted, her voice cracking despite her determination to remain composed. "I can cook, mend clothes, tend to the sick. I grew up helping my father with his medical practice before he passed. I am not some delicate flower who will swoon at the first sign of hardship." Samuel's expression softened slightly, but his resolve did not waver. "It is not a matter of your capabilities, miss. It is a matter of propriety and safety. The journey west is treacherous enough without adding complications. I have families to think about, reputations to maintain." "I am sorry, but my answer remains no." Helena felt the last thread of hope snap inside her chest. She'd sold everything she owned to make it this far, to escape the suffocating expectations of her late father's business partner, who decided that marrying his deceased friend's daughter would be the perfect way to settle outstanding debts. Martin Cowpersmith was 47 years old, had breath that smelled of rotting teeth and bourbon, and had made it abundantly clear that he viewed Helena as property he'd purchased fair and square. She'd fled Boston 3 weeks ago with nothing but a small trunk, her mother's wedding ring, and a desperate plan to reach her aunt in California. But now, kneeling in the dirt beside a wagon train that represented her only hope of escape, that plan was crumbling like ash. "Please," she whispered one final time, but Samuel had already turned away, calling out orders to his teamsters as they prepared for departure. Helena pushed herself to her feet, brushing the dust from her dark blue traveling dress with trembling hands. The morning sun was climbing higher in the clear April sky, warming the air and illuminating the bustle of activity around the wagon train. Families were loading last-minute supplies, children were chasing each other between the wagons, and somewhere nearby a fiddle played a cheerful tune that seemed to mock her despair. She stood there for a long moment, watching her last chance at freedom prepare to roll away without her. The thought of returning to Boston, of facing Martin's smug satisfaction when she crawled back defeated, made her stomach turn. But what choice did she have? She had barely enough money left for food, let alone passage on another wagon train or stagecoach west. "You look like someone just told you the world was ending." The voice came from behind her, low and warm with a hint of amusement that should have annoyed her but somehow didn't. Helena turned to find a man watching her with eyes the color of summer sky, his tall frame leaning casually against a hitching post. He wore dusty brown trousers, a chambray shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal tanned forearms, and a hat that had seen better days. A red bandana hung loose around his neck, and there was something about the way he stood, relaxed but alert, that suggested he was someone accustomed to taking care of himself. "That is a fairly accurate assessment," Helena replied, too exhausted to maintain the polite pretense that everything was fine. "Though I suppose the world has not ended entirely. It just feels that way at the moment." The cowboy pushed off from the hitching post and walked closer, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. Up close, Helena could see he was young, perhaps 25 or 26, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at the edges beneath his hat. There was a kindness in his face that caught her off guard, a genuine concern in those blue eyes that made her want to trust him despite every lesson her father had taught her about being cautious with strangers. "I heard you asking old Samuel for passage west," he said. "That is a hard man to persuade once he's made up his mind about something." "So I discovered," Helena said, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. "Apparently a woman traveling alone is too scandalous for his sensibilities. Never mind that staying here might be considerably more dangerous than anything I would face on the trail." The cowboy studied her for a moment, his gaze thoughtful rather than intrusive. "Running from something." Helena hesitated, then decided there was no point in lying. This stranger would be the last person in Galesburg she'd likely ever speak to. "Someone, actually. A man who believes he purchased the right to marry me along with my father's medical practice." "And did he?" "Not in any way that matters to me," Helena said firmly. "My father's debts died with him, and I will not be sold like livestock to settle accounts I had no part in creating." The cowboy's expression hardened slightly, a muscle tightening in his jaw. "No, I expect you should not be." He was quiet for another moment, then extended his hand. "Donovan Nash, most people call me Don." Helena shook his hand, noting the calluses on his palm and the strength in his grip. "Helena Foster, most people call me Helena." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Well, Helena Foster, it seems to me you have got yourself into a difficult situation. How set are you on going west?" "Completely set," Helena said without hesitation. "My mother's sister lives in Sacramento. She's the only family I have left, and she's been begging me to come stay with her for years. I should have gone sooner, but my father was ill and needed care, and then after he passed there were so many arrangements to make, and by the time I realized how bad things had gotten with Martin, I was already trapped." Donovan nodded slowly, processing this information. "Sacramento is a long way from here. Even if you caught up with another wagon train, you are looking at 5 or 6 months of hard travel, and that is if everything goes well. And you heard Samuel. Most wagon masters are not going to take a woman traveling alone." "I am aware of that," Helena said, trying to keep the despair from creeping back into her voice. "But I do not have many other options. I cannot go back to Boston, and I cannot stay here. Martin has connections everywhere. It is only a matter of time before someone sees me and sends word back to him about where I am." Donovan was quiet for a long moment, his blue eyes fixed on something in the distance. Helena watched his face, trying to read the thoughts playing out behind his contemplative expression. Finally, he looked back at her. "I've got a proposition for you," he said slowly. "Now, hear me out before you say no, because I know it is going to sound strange at first." Helena's guard went up immediately. She'd heard enough propositions from men to know they rarely ended well for the woman involved. But something in Donovan's earnest expression made her hold her tongue and listen. "I've got a ranch about 12 miles east of here," he continued. "Nothing fancy, just 300 acres of good grazing land, a decent house, and a small barn. I run cattle mostly, some horses. It is a good life, honest work, but it is lonely. I have been thinking for a while now about finding someone to share it with, someone who would not mind the isolation and the hard work." Helena's heart sank. So he was just like all the rest, offering help with strings attached. "Mr. Nash, I appreciate whatever you think you are offering, but I am not interested in trading one unwanted marriage for another. I would rather take my chances on the streets of Galesburg than sell myself to a stranger, no matter how kind he seems." "That is not what I am suggesting," Donovan said quickly, holding up his hands. "Let me finish, please. What I am proposing is this. Come out to my ranch, see the place, meet my housekeeper, Mrs. Calloway, who lives in the guest cottage. Stay for a few weeks, maybe a month. You would have your own room, your own space. No expectations, no obligations. Just a safe place to catch your breath and figure out your next move. And what would you get out of this arrangement? Helena asked, skepticism clear in her voice. Forgive me for being blunt, Mr. Nash, but in my experience, men do not offer charity without expecting something in return. Donovan's expression remained serious. Fair question. What I would get is some help around the place, Mrs. Calloway is getting on in years, and the house is bigger than one old woman can reasonably manage. If you meant what you said about being able to cook and mend and help with sick folk, well, I've got ranch hands who always need tending to one injury or another, and my own cooking skills extend about as far as beans and burned bacon. But if after a few weeks you still want to head west, I would help you do it. I know people, have connections with some of the trading posts along the route. I could arrange safe passage for you, make sure you got where you need to go. Helena stared at him, trying to find the trap in his words. Why would you do this for a complete stranger? Because I know what it is like to run from something, Donovan said quietly. And because I do not like the idea of leaving someone in trouble when I might be able to help. My mother raised me better than that. There was something in his voice when he mentioned his mother, a softness mixed with old pain, that made Helena believe he might actually be sincere. She studied his face, searching for signs of deception or hidden motives, but all she saw was patient openness, as if he understood her need to be suspicious and did not hold it against her. Your housekeeper really exists, Helena asked. This is not just a story to get me to come with you, Mrs. Calloway is as real as you and me, Donovan assured her. Lost her husband to consumption 5 years back. She needed a place to stay, and I needed someone to help manage the house and garden. She lives in the guest cottage, like I said, keeps to herself mostly but makes the best apple pie you have ever tasted. You would like her. Helena looked back toward the wagon train, where Samuel Hutchins was climbing up onto the lead wagon, preparing to give the signal to move out. In a few minutes, her last hope of heading west today would disappear down the road in a cloud of dust. She thought about her options. She could try to stay in Galesburg, find work and save money for another wagon train, but that would take months and increase the risk of Martin tracking her down. She could try to travel alone, but that was dangerous and likely impossible. Or she could take a chance on this cowboy with kind eyes and a strange proposition that might be exactly what it seemed to be, or might be something else entirely. If I agree to this, Helena said slowly, and I find the situation is not what you have described, what is to stop me from leaving? Nothing at all, Donovan said simply. I would bring you back to town myself if you asked. Helena, I am not trying to trap you or trick you. I am trying to help. But I understand why you would be cautious, and I respect that. I tell you what, come out to the ranch for just one day. Meet Mrs. Calloway. See the place in daylight, and if you do not feel safe or comfortable, I will bring you right back to town and give you enough money for a room at the boarding house while you figure out your next steps. No strings, no conditions. Helena took a deep breath, weighing her limited options against her instincts. Everything in her father's careful teachings told her to be wary, to protect herself, to assume the worst. But there was something about Donovan Nash that made her want to take a leap of faith. Maybe it was desperation, or maybe it was the genuine concern in his eyes, but she found herself nodding slowly. One day, she agreed. I will come see your ranch for one day, meet your housekeeper, and decide from there. Donovan's face broke into a smile that transformed his features, making him look younger and lighting up those blue eyes with warmth. That is all I am asking. Thank you for trusting me enough to give it a chance. I am not sure trust is the right word, Helena said, though she found herself smiling slightly despite her anxiety. Desperate pragmatism might be more accurate. I will take it either way, Donovan said. He gestured toward a horse tied nearby, a sturdy bay gelding with intelligent eyes. That is Shadow. He's got a gentle disposition and does not mind riding double. If you have got a trunk or belongings, I can come back for them with the wagon later. I have one small trunk at the boarding house, Helena said. Everything I own fits inside it. Something flickered in Donovan's expression, sympathy perhaps, but he did not comment on how sad that was. Instead, he untied Shadow and led him over to where Helena stood. We will pick it up on the way out of town then. The ranch is not far, just a pleasant ride through some pretty country. Helena allowed Donovan to help her up onto Shadow's back, then felt the horse shift as he swung up behind her. He kept a respectful distance, not pressing against her any more than necessary to keep them both balanced, and she appreciated that small consideration. As they rode toward the boarding house, Helena tried to calm the nervous flutter in her stomach. She was either making the best decision of her life or the worst, and she would not know which until they reached the ranch. The boarding house was a narrow two-story building painted pale yellow with white shutters. Helena directed Donovan to wait outside while she settled her account with the landlady and collected her trunk. Mrs. Henderson, the sharp-eyed woman who ran the establishment, gave Helena a knowing look when she explained she would not need the room after all. "Found yourself a gentleman, did you?" Mrs. Henderson said with a smirk that made Helena's cheeks burn. "I found myself an opportunity," Helena corrected firmly, refusing to explain further. She paid what she owed, retrieved her trunk, and returned outside to find Donovan had brought around a small wagon he'd apparently had stabled nearby. "Figured this would be easier than trying to balance a trunk on Shadow," he explained as he loaded her trunk into the wagon bed. "More comfortable for you too." They left Galesburg heading east, away from the wagon train that was now just a distant line of white canvas tops disappearing westward. Helena sat beside Donovan on the wagon bench, her hands folded tightly in her lap as she watched the countryside roll by. The land here was beautiful in its own way, all rolling green hills and scattered groves of trees just beginning to leaf out with spring growth. Wild flowers dotted the meadows in splashes of yellow and purple, and birds sang from the fence posts they passed. "It is pretty here," Helena admitted after they'd been riding in comfortable silence for a while. "It grows on you," Donovan said. "When I first came out here 3 years ago, I thought I would hate being so far from everything. I grew up in St. Louis, used to the noise and crowds and constant activity. But there is something peaceful about having space to breathe, about waking up to nothing but bird song and cattle lowing instead of factory whistles and wagon traffic." "What brought you out here?" Helena asked, curious despite herself. Donovan was quiet for a moment, his hands steady on the reins as Shadow plodded along the well-worn road. "My parents both died of cholera in the epidemic of '73. I was 21, suddenly alone, and realized there was nothing keeping me in the city. I had a little money saved, and my father had a small inheritance I used to buy the land out here. Figured I would try my hand at ranching, see if I could build something of my own." "I am sorry about your parents," Helena said softly. "Thank you." "It has been 5 years now, so the sharp edge of grief has dulled some, but I still miss them. My mother especially. She was a remarkable woman, strong and kind and practical. She is the one who taught me that helping people is never wasted effort, even if they cannot pay you back." Helena thought about her own father, about the long months of caring for him as consumption slowly stole his strength and breath. "My father was sick for almost a year before he passed. Some days I was so tired I thought I might collapse from exhaustion, but I never regretted taking care of him. He was a good man, just a terrible judge of character when it came to his business partners." "The man you are running from, Martin Cowpersmith," Helena confirmed. "Father trusted him completely, never saw the snake beneath the friendly exterior. By the time Father died, Martin had restructured everything so that he controlled the medical practice, the house, all of Father's assets. He presented me with a marriage proposal 2 days after the funeral, acting like he was doing me a tremendous favor by offering to let me keep my home and position if I became his wife. What did you do? I told him I would rather eat glass, Helena said, the memory still filling her with righteous anger. He laughed, told me I would change my tune once I realized I had no other options, said he would give me a week to come around, be reasonable. That is when I packed my trunk and left in the middle of the night. Donovan glanced over at her, respect clear in his expression. That took courage, or stupidity, Helena said wryly. I am still deciding which. Courage, Donovan said firmly. Definitely courage. They continued riding, and Helena found herself relaxing despite her earlier anxiety. Donovan was an easy person to talk to, neither pressing her with questions nor filling every silence with unnecessary chatter. He pointed out landmarks as they went, telling her about his neighbors scattered across the surrounding farms and ranches, describing the small community that existed even in this relatively isolated area. We are not completely cut off from civilization, he assured her. Galesburg is close enough for supplies and church on Sundays if you are so inclined. There is a doctor about 8 miles south, though he is getting old and does not always make house calls anymore. That is part of why having someone with medical knowledge would be helpful. My ranch hands are always getting themselves into scrapes, and Mrs. Calloway knows herbs and home remedies but nothing formal. I am not a real doctor, Helena warned. I just helped my father with basic care, changing dressings, mixing medicines, that sort of thing. That is more than most people around here know, Donovan said. And I am not asking you to perform surgery, just help out where you can. The road curved around a stand of oak trees, and then Donovan was guiding Shadow off the main path onto a smaller track that led through a gate marked with a simple wooden arch. Letters burned into the wood spelled out Nash Ranch in neat block letters. Home, Donovan announced simply. Helena looked around with growing interest as they rolled up the track toward a collection of buildings nestled against a gentle hillside. The house was larger than she'd expected, a solid 2-story structure built from honey-colored wood with a wide porch wrapping around the front and one side. The roof was steep-pitched and looked newly shingled, and white shutters framed generous windows that would let in plenty of light. To the left of the house stood a good-sized barn painted dark red, and beyond that she could see a bunkhouse, several smaller outbuildings, and a neat little cottage that must be where Mrs. Calloway lived. Everything about the place spoke of care and pride. The yard was tidy, the fences in good repair, and even from a distance Helena could see that the barn and outbuildings were well maintained. This was not the rough, thrown-together ranch she'd half expected. This was a real home, built to last. What do you think? Donovan asked, and Helena detected a note of nervousness in his voice as if her opinion actually mattered to him. It is beautiful, Helena said honestly. Much nicer than I expected. Donovan grinned. I will choose to take that as a compliment. Come on, let's get you introduced to Mrs. Calloway before she sees strange women showing up and gets the wrong idea. He drove the wagon right up to the front of the house and helped Helena down before retrieving her trunk. The front door opened before they reached it, and a woman stepped out onto the porch. She was perhaps 60 years old, with steel gray hair pulled back in a neat bun and dark eyes that assessed Helena with intelligent interest. She wore a simple brown dress covered by a white apron and had the capable look of someone who knew her own worth and did not suffer fools. Mrs. Calloway, Donovan said warmly, I would like you to meet Miss Helena Foster. She's going to be staying with us for a while, helping out around the place. Helena, this is Mrs. Margaret Calloway, who keeps this ranch running smoother than any of us deserve. Mrs. Calloway came down the porch steps, still studying Helena with those sharp eyes. Is that so? And does Miss Foster know what she is getting herself into, coming out to a bachelor's ranch? I have explained the situation, Donovan assured her. She knows she will have her own room, that you are here as chaperone and companion, and that she is free to leave whenever she wishes. Mrs. Calloway said, then surprised Helena by reaching out and taking her hands. You look exhausted, child. When was the last time you had a decent meal? The unexpected kindness brought tears to Helena's eyes before she could stop them. Yesterday morning, I think. I have been too nervous to eat much. Well, that will not do at all, Mrs. Calloway declared. She turned to Donovan. You take her trunk up to the blue room while I get this girl fed. She looks like a strong wind could blow her over. Yes, madam, Donovan said with obvious affection. He winked at Helena. Fair warning, Mrs. Calloway likes to mother people. You might as well give in to it gracefully because resistance is futile. Oh, hush you, Mrs. Calloway said, but she was smiling. She kept hold of Helena's hand and led her toward the house. Come along, dear. Let's get some food in you and then we will show you around properly. Helena let herself be led inside, through a spacious front room with comfortable furniture and large windows that flooded the space with afternoon light. The house smelled wonderful, like fresh bread and something savory cooking. Mrs. Calloway guided her through to a large kitchen with a massive cast iron stove, open shelving displaying neat rows of dishes and preserves, and a sturdy wooden table that could easily seat 8 people. Sit, Mrs. Calloway commanded, pointing to one of the chairs. I've got stew on for dinner, but I can get you some bread and cheese to tide you over. Helena sat, feeling like she'd been caught up in a whirlwind. Mrs. Calloway moved around the kitchen with practiced efficiency, slicing thick pieces of golden bread, adding hunks of yellow cheese and slices of cold ham. She poured a glass of milk from a covered pitcher and set everything in front of Helena. Eat, she said simply. Helena did not need to be told twice. The food was delicious, simple but perfectly prepared, and she realized just how hungry she actually was. Mrs. Calloway watched her eat with satisfaction, then sat down across the table with a cup of tea. So, the older woman said, Donovan told you that you would have your own room and no obligations, yes? Helena nodded, swallowing her mouthful of bread before answering. He said I could stay as long as I needed, help out around the ranch, and if I still wanted to go west after a few weeks, he would help arrange safe passage. And you believed him? I am not sure, Helena admitted. I want to believe him. He seems sincere. But I have learned to be cautious about believing what men tell me. Smart girl, Mrs. Calloway said approvingly. Well, let me tell you something that might set your mind at ease. I have known Donovan Nash for 3 years now, ever since he hired me to keep house for him. In all that time, I have never known him to tell a lie or break a promise. He is a good man, Helena, one of the truly good ones. If he told you he would keep you safe and help you get where you need to go, you can believe him. Why did he offer to help me? Helena asked. He does not know me at all. Mrs. Calloway smiled, a knowing look in her eyes. Because that is who he is. He sees someone in trouble and he cannot help but try to fix it. It is what his mother taught him, and the lesson stuck. But I will tell you something else too, something he probably did not tell you himself. This ranch, for all its success, is a lonely place. Donovan works himself near to exhaustion most days, keeping busy so he does not have to think about the fact that he comes home to an empty house every night. He has been talking for months now about maybe finding himself a wife, building a real family here. But he is cautious too, does not trust easily after some girl in St. Louis broke his heart before his parents died. Helena absorbed this information, not entirely sure what Mrs. Calloway was implying. I am not looking for a husband, she said carefully. I just need a safe place to rest and plan my next move. And that is fine, Mrs. Calloway assured her. I am just explaining the lay of the land, as it were. Donovan is not going to pressure you or make demands. but I've got eyes in my head, and I saw how he looked at you when he helped you down from that wagon. Just saying that maybe this arrangement might turn into something neither of you are expecting." Before Helena could respond to that unsettling observation, Donovan himself appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Everything all right in here?" "Just fine," Mrs. Calloway said brightly. "I was telling Helena how wonderful it will be to have another woman around the place." "Gets tiresome being the only female among all you men." "I imagine it does," Donovan agreed. He looked at Helena. "Would you like to see your room?" "Get settled in a bit before dinner," Helena nodded, grateful for the excuse to escape Mrs. Calloway's too perceptive gaze. She followed Donovan back through the house and up a staircase that led to the second floor. The stairs opened onto a hallway with 4 doors, all closed except one at the end which stood open. "That is my room," Donovan said, gesturing to the open door. "Yours is here." He opened the first door on the right, revealing a lovely bedroom painted a soft blue-gray. A large bed with a colorful quilt dominated the space, flanked by 2 small tables with oil lamps. A wardrobe stood against one wall, a dresser with a mirror against another, and a rocking chair sat by the window that looked out over the front yard and the rolling hills beyond. "It is beautiful," Helena said, genuinely touched by the care evident in the room's simple furnishings. "My mother decorated this room before she passed," Donovan said quietly. "I have kept it just as she left it. She always hoped I would have a family someday, children who would need bedrooms and a wife who would make this house a real home." Helena walked to the window, looking out at the pastoral scene. The afternoon sun cast everything in golden light, making the landscape look like something from a painting. "Do you still want that? A family, more than anything," Donovan admitted, "but I have not found the right person yet. The few women in the area are either already married or we do not suit. I have thought about going back to St. Louis to find a wife, but the idea of bringing some city girl out here who might hate ranch life does not appeal to me. I want someone who would see this place the way I do, who would appreciate the peace and possibilities instead of just seeing isolation and hard work." Helena turned to face him, studying his profile as he looked out the window beside her. "What happened with the girl in St. Louis? Mrs. Calloway mentioned someone broke your heart." Donovan's jaw tightened. "Her name was Catherine. We were engaged, planning to marry. Then my parents died and I decided to move out here. She refused to come with me, said she would not throw away civilization to live in the middle of nowhere. I offered to stay in St. Louis, give up the ranch, but she said if I was the kind of man who would even consider leaving the city, then I was not the man she thought I was marrying. She broke off the engagement 2 weeks before we were supposed to wed." "I am sorry," Helena said softly. "I am not anymore," Donovan said, looking at her now. "It hurt at the time, but I realize now we would have made each other miserable. She wanted something I could never be, and I wanted something she could never appreciate. Better to discover that before the wedding than after." They stood there in the quiet afternoon light, the air between them charged with something Helena could not quite name. Finally, Donovan cleared his throat and stepped back. "I will let you get settled. Dinner is usually around 6. Nothing fancy, just whatever Mrs. Calloway has cooked up. After dinner, I can show you around the barn and outbuildings if you like, introduce you to the ranch hands." "That would be nice," Helena said. "Thank you, Donovan, for everything. I know I have been suspicious and cautious, but I do appreciate what you are doing for me." "You have got every right to be cautious," Donovan said. "But I hope in time you will come to trust that I mean what I say. You are safe here, Helena, for as long as you need to be." He left, closing the door softly behind him, and Helena sank down onto the edge of the bed. The mattress was comfortable. The room was lovely. And for the first time in months, she felt like she could actually breathe without the weight of fear pressing down on her chest. Maybe, just maybe, taking Donovan Nash up on his strange offer had been the right decision after all. She spent the next hour unpacking her meager belongings, hanging her 3 dresses in the wardrobe and arranging her few personal items on the dresser. Her mother's wedding ring she kept in a small wooden box that had been her father's, along with a locket containing miniature portraits of her parents, and the deed to her father's medical practice that Martin had somehow overlooked when he seized everything else. A knock on the door startled her from her thoughts. "Come in," she called. Mrs. Calloway entered carrying a large pitcher of water and fresh towels. "Thought you might like to wash up before dinner. There is a basin on the washstand there." "Thank you," Helena said. She hesitated, then added, "Mrs. Calloway, can I ask you something?" "Of course, dear." "Why are you really here? Not just keeping house, I mean. Donovan mentioned you lost your husband, but you seem too independent and capable to need charity." Mrs. Calloway smiled. "You are perceptive." "You are right. I do not need charity. After Thomas died, I had several offers of places to stay, children of our own who would have taken me in. But they all came with conditions, expectations of how I should behave, what I should do with my remaining years. Donovan offered me something different. He offered me independence, purpose, and respect. I have my own cottage, my own space. I work because I want to, not because someone expects me to earn my keep. And in return, I help make this ranch run smoothly, and I get to watch a good man build something worthwhile. It is a fair exchange, and more than that, it is a friendship." "He is lucky to have you," Helena said. "I am lucky to have found him," Mrs. Calloway corrected. "Not many men would give an old widow her own space and treat her like an equal partner in running a household. But Donovan is not like most men. You will see that if you stay long enough." She left Helena to wash up, and Helena found herself thinking about what the older woman had said. There was something special about Donovan Nash, something that went beyond simple kindness. He seemed to see people as they actually were, not as society dictated they should be. It was refreshing and more than a little appealing. Dinner that evening was a lively affair. In addition to Donovan, Helena, and Mrs. Calloway, there were 4 ranch hands who ate at the main house. They introduced themselves as Jack, Peter, Samuel, and young Tom, who could not have been more than 19. They were polite to Helena, welcoming without being forward, and she got the sense that Donovan ran his ranch with the same fairness and respect he seemed to extend to everyone. The conversation flowed easily. Talk of cattle and horses, repairs needed on the north fence line, plans for planting a kitchen garden. Helena mostly listened, getting a feel for the rhythm of ranch life. It was so different from the formal dinners she'd endured in Boston, where every word was carefully measured and conversations followed strict rules of propriety. Here, people laughed and interrupted each other and told stories with genuine affection. It felt like family, she realized. Like belonging. After dinner, Donovan made good on his promise to show her around. They walked out to the barn as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The barn was clean and well organized, with 6 stalls currently occupied by horses and room for more. Donovan introduced her to each horse by name, explaining their personalities and quirks with the easy affection of someone who genuinely cared for his animals. "This is Daisy," he said, stopping at the stall of a pretty paint mare. "She is my best cattle horse, smart as a whip and quick on her feet, and this big fellow is Thunder. He has got the worst name to temperament mismatch you have ever seen. Gentle as a lamb despite sounding like he should be wild." Helena laughed, reaching out to stroke Thunder's soft nose. "I like him." "He likes you too," Donovan observed. "Horses are good judges of character." They continued the tour, moving on to see the chicken coop where Mrs. Calloway kept 24 laying hens, the smoke house, the root cellar, and finally the bunkhouse where the ranch hands lived. By the time they finished, the sun had set and stars were beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. "It is a lot to take in," Donovan said as they walked slowly back toward the main house. "But you will learn the rhythms quickly if you decide to stay." "If I stay," Helena repeated, though the words felt less certain now than they had this morning. "Donovan, can I ask you something? Anything. What do you really want from me? And please be honest. I am trying to understand why you are doing this." Donovan was quiet for a long moment, his face thoughtful in the dim light. "Honestly, I am not entirely sure myself. When I saw you there in town, begging for passage west, you reminded me of myself 5 years ago. Desperate, alone, running from something and hoping to find something better. I remember how that felt, and I remember wishing someone had offered me a hand instead of letting me stumble through everything alone. So partly, I am doing this because I wish someone had done it for me. And the other part," he looked at her then, his blue eyes serious. "The other part is harder to explain. There was something about you, Helena. The way you held your head high even while you were on your knees in the dirt. The fire in your voice when you talked about not being sold like livestock. You are strong and brave, and you deserve better than what life has handed you so far. I want to help you get better. And yes, maybe there is a selfish part of me that hopes if you stay long enough, you might decide this place, this life, is worth staying for, that I might be worth staying for." Helena's breath caught in her throat. The honesty in his words, the vulnerability, touched something deep inside her. "I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything," Donovan assured her. "I am not asking for promises or commitments. I am just being honest about where I stand. You asked, so I told you, but that does not change anything. You are still free to leave whenever you want, and I will still help you get to California if that is what you choose." They had reached the front porch, and Helena paused with her hand on the railing. "Thank you for your honesty. And for everything else. I am going to need some time to think about all of this." "Take all the time you need," Donovan said. "Good night, Helena." "Good night, Donovan." Helena went inside and up to her room, her mind spinning with everything that had happened in one extraordinary day. She changed into her nightgown and climbed into the comfortable bed, but sleep was a long time coming. She kept thinking about Donovan's words, about the life he was offering, about the strange pull she felt toward this man she'd only just met. She'd been so certain that going west was her only option, that California and her aunt represented the only possible future. But now, lying in this comfortable room in this beautiful house, she found herself wondering if maybe, just maybe, fate had brought her to exactly where she needed to be. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. The next morning, Helena woke to sunlight streaming through her window and the sound of roosters crowing. For a moment she was disoriented, then memory flooded back and she sat up, taking in the blue-gray walls and simple furnishings. It had not been a dream. She was really here, on a ranch in Illinois, in the home of a cowboy who had offered her sanctuary without asking for anything in return. She dressed quickly in one of her simple work dresses and made her way downstairs, following the smell of coffee and bacon to the kitchen. Mrs. Calloway was already there, cooking breakfast while humming softly to herself. "Good morning, dear," the older woman said cheerfully. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in months," Helena admitted. "What can I do to help?" Mrs. Calloway looked pleased. "You can set the table. Donovan and the hands will be in shortly for breakfast. There are plates in that cupboard there, silverware in the drawer." Helena set to work, and by the time she had the table ready, Donovan was coming through the back door with Jack and Peter. He smiled when he saw her, a warm, genuine smile that made her heart skip slightly. "Good morning," he said. "I hope the roosters did not wake you too early." "I think I needed to be up anyway," Helena replied. "This is a working ranch. I should keep ranch hours." Breakfast was another pleasant meal, full of easy conversation and good food. Afterward, Mrs. Calloway enlisted Helena's help with the dishes and then the day's housework. Helena found herself falling into a comfortable rhythm. working alongside the older woman to clean rooms, change linens, and prepare vegetables for dinner. Around midday, young Tom appeared at the kitchen door, his face pale and his left hand wrapped in a bloody cloth. "Sorry to bother you, madam," he said to Mrs. Calloway, "but I caught my hand on some barbed wire and it is bleeding pretty bad." "Let me see," Helena said immediately, her father's training taking over. She unwrapped the cloth carefully, revealing a nasty gash across Tom's palm. "This needs to be cleaned and stitched. Mrs. Calloway, do you have clean cloth for bandages and a needle and thread?" "I've got a medicine box in the pantry," Mrs. Calloway said, already moving. "Take him into the dining room where the light is better." Helena led Tom to the dining table and had him sit while she examined the wound more carefully. It was deep but clean, the edges relatively straight. She could do this. She had watched her father stitch dozens of wounds and had done a few simple ones herself under his supervision. Mrs. Calloway returned with a wooden box containing various medical supplies. Helena found what she needed, including a precious small bottle of carbolic acid for disinfecting. She cleaned the wound thoroughly, ignoring Tom's sharp intake of breath, then threaded the finest needle she could find. "This is going to hurt," she warned him, "but I will be as quick as I can." Tom nodded bravely, his jaw set. Helena worked quickly and carefully, placing neat, even stitches to close the gash. She could feel Mrs. Calloway watching her, and when she glanced up briefly, the older woman was nodding with approval. When she finished, Helena cleaned the wound one more time, applied a salve from the medicine box, and wrapped Tom's hand in clean bandages. "Keep this clean and dry. Change the bandages daily and come find me if you see any signs of infection. Redness, heat, red streaks going up your arm. The stitches can come out in about 10 days. "Thank you, Miss Foster," Tom said, looking at his neatly bandaged hand with something like awe. "That is real doctoring, that is." "I am not a real doctor," Helena protested. "I just learned from my father." "Well, it is more than anyone else around here could have done," Tom said. "I am grateful." He left, and Mrs. Calloway turned to Helena with a broad smile. "That was impressive. You have got a real skill there, Helena." "I am just glad I could help," Helena said, though she felt a small glow of pride. It had felt good to use her knowledge to help someone. Maybe she could be useful here after all. Word of Helena's medical skills spread quickly among the ranch hands. Over the next few days, she found herself treating various minor ailments. Samuel had a persistent cough that responded well to a tea made from herbs Mrs. Calloway grew in her garden. Jack had an infected splinter that Helena removed and cleaned. Peter had chronic back pain that improved with the liniment Helena mixed using her father's old recipe. But it was not just medical work that filled her days. Helena helped Mrs. Calloway with cooking and preserving, learning to make bread from scratch and how to work the big cast iron stove. She mended clothes for the ranch hands, planted seeds in the kitchen garden, and even helped Donovan with the bookkeeping when he discovered she had a head for numbers. The days fell into a pleasant rhythm, and Helena found herself thinking less and less about continuing west. The ranch was becoming familiar, the people dear to her. Mrs. Calloway was teaching her everything she knew about running a household and garden. The ranch hands treated her with respect and genuine affection. And Donovan was always there, steady and kind and increasingly essential to her happiness. They fell into the habit of walking together in the evenings after dinner, talking about everything and nothing. He told her about his dreams for the ranch, his plans to expand the herd and maybe start breeding horses seriously. She told him about growing up in Boston, about her father's medical practice, and the books she'd read, and the places she'd dreamed of seeing someday. One evening, about 2 weeks after Helena had arrived, they were walking along the fence line that marked the northern boundary of Donovan's property. The sun was setting in a spectacular display of purple and gold, and the air was soft with late spring warmth. "I have been thinking," Helena said slowly, "about what happens next." Donovan glanced at her, his expression carefully neutral. "And what have you decided?" "I am not sure yet," Helena admitted. "When I first came here, I was so certain that going west was the only answer. That California and my aunt represented my only chance at a real future. But being here, living this life, I am not so certain anymore." "What changed?" Donovan asked quietly. Helena stopped walking and turned to face him. "Everything changed. You changed everything, Donovan. You and Mrs. Calloway and this beautiful place. I have been happier these past 2 weeks than I have been in years. I feel useful here, needed. I feel like I belong in a way I never did in Boston, where I was always just the doctor's daughter, expected to smile prettily and make a good marriage and never do anything of substance." "You could have all of that here," Donovan said, taking a step closer. "The belonging, the purpose, the happiness. You could have a real life here, Helena. Not just as someone helping out, but as a real part of this ranch, this family we are building." "Are you asking me to stay permanently?" Helena asked, her heart pounding. "I am asking you to consider it," Donovan said. "I am asking you to think about what we might build together. I know it has only been 2 weeks, but Helena, I cannot imagine this place without you anymore. You have become part of the fabric of everything here. Mrs. Calloway is happier, the ranch hands are healthier, and I am falling in love with you." Helena's breath caught. "Donovan." "I know it is too soon," he said quickly. "I know you need time, and I am not asking you to make any promises right now, but I need you to know how I feel. I need you to understand that what I am offering is not just a place to stay or work to keep you busy. I am offering you my heart, my life, everything I have built here. I want to marry you, Helena. I want to build a family with you, grow old with you, make this ranch into the home it is meant to be with you by my side." Helena stared at him, emotions warring inside her chest. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, to throw herself into his arms and accept everything he was offering. But another part, the cautious part that had learned hard lessons about trusting too quickly, held her back. "I care about you," she said carefully. "More than I thought possible in such a short time. But Donovan, I am still figuring out who I am outside of being my father's daughter or Martin's intended victim. I need to know that whatever I choose, I am choosing it for the right reasons, not just because I am grateful or afraid or because you have been kind to me." Donovan reached out and took her hands in his blue eyes serious and understanding. "That is fair. That is more than fair. Take all the time you need, Helena. I am not going anywhere, and neither is this ranch. When you are ready to decide, I will be here, whatever your answer is." They walked back to the house in companionable silence, hands still linked. That night, lying in her comfortable bed, Helena found herself thinking about what a life here would really mean. She would be giving up California, giving up the idea of living near her aunt. But in exchange, she would have this ranch, this community, and a man who loved her for who she was, not what she represented or what he could gain from her. The next morning brought unexpected trouble. Helena was in the kitchen helping Mrs. Calloway preserve strawberries when Donovan came in through the back door, his expression grim. "Helena, I need to talk to you privately," he said. Something in his tone made her stomach drop. She followed him into the front room, Mrs. Calloway close behind despite his request for privacy. "What is it?" Helena asked. "What is wrong?" "Jack was in town this morning picking up supplies," Donovan said. "He heard some men asking questions at the general store. They were looking for a woman matching your description, said they were hired by someone named Martin Cowpersmith to track down his missing fiancé." Helena felt the blood drain from her face. "They found me. I knew it was only a matter of time, but I thought I had more than this." "How did they trace me here so quickly?" "They are asking at every town within 100 miles of Boston," Donovan explained. Jack said they showed your photograph at the store. Mrs. Henderson from the boarding house must have told them she saw you leave with a cowboy. They are working their way through all the nearby ranches. I have to leave, Helena said immediately, panic rising in her chest. I have to leave right now before they come here. I will not let Martin drag me back to Boston, and I will not bring trouble to your door. You are not going anywhere, Donovan said firmly. We will handle this together. You do not understand, Helena said desperately. Martin has money and connections. He will make trouble for you, maybe even claim you kidnapped me or something worse. I cannot let that happen. And I cannot let him take you, Donovan said, his jaw set in a stubborn line she was beginning to recognize. Helena, there is a way to solve this permanently. Marry me. Helena stared at him. What? Marry me, Donovan repeated. Right now, today. If you are my wife, Martin has no legal claim on you. You would be under my protection, my name, my authority. He cannot force you to return to Boston if you are a married woman with a husband who will stand between you. That is ridiculous, Helena said, though her heart was pounding. You cannot marry me just to protect me from Martin. Why not? Donovan challenged. I already told you I want to marry you. This just moves up the timeline. I love you, Helena. I think you might love me too, or could love me if you let yourself. So marry me. Not just for protection, though that is a good practical reason. Marry me because we belong together, because what we have found here is rare and precious and worth fighting for. Mrs. Calloway, who had been silent until now, spoke up. He is right, dear, about all of it. I have seen the way you look at each other, the way you have blossomed here, and practically speaking, it is the best solution. Once you are married, Martin Cowpersmith has no legal leg to stand on. Helena looked between them, her mind racing. It was crazy, impulsive, everything she had sworn she would never do. But it was also right in a way she could not quite explain. She did care for Donovan, was maybe already in love with him, though she had been afraid to admit it even to herself. And the thought of being dragged back to Boston, forced to marry Martin, made her physically ill. What about a license? She asked, grasping at practical concerns. Do we not need time to arrange things properly? I know the minister in Galesburg, Donovan said. Reverend Thompson is a good man and a friend. If we ride in right now, explain the situation, I am sure he would help us. We can get the license and have the ceremony all in one day if needed. This is insane, Helena whispered, but even as she said it, she knew what her answer would be. Yes. Yes, all right, let's do it. Donovan's face broke into that brilliant smile that made her heart skip. You are sure? I am sure, Helena said and realized she meant it. I choose this, Donovan. I choose you, this life, this ranch. Not because I am running from something, but because I am running toward something better. Toward you. He crossed the distance between them in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that left her breathless and clinging to his shoulders. When they finally broke apart, Mrs. Calloway was dabbing at her eyes with her apron. About time, the older woman said gruffly. Now go on, both of you. Get into town and get yourselves properly wed before those men show up asking questions. I will hold down the fort here. They took the wagon, Donovan pushing Shadow to a fast pace that ate up the miles to Galesburg. Helena sat beside him, her hand in his, and tried to wrap her mind around the fact that by the end of the day she would be a married woman. Mrs. Donovan Nash. Helena Nash. The names rolled around in her head, sounding more right with each repetition. Reverend Thompson was a balding man in his 50s with kind eyes and a gentle manner. He listened to their story with growing concern, then nodded decisively. I can marry you today, he said. The courthouse is still open. We can get the license and have the ceremony right here in the church within the hour. But I need to know this is what you both truly want, not just a solution to an immediate problem. I love her, Donovan said simply. I have been planning to ask her properly, but circumstances have forced our hand. This is what I want, Reverend. She is what I want. And you, Miss Foster? Reverend Thompson asked gently. Helena met Donovan's eyes, seeing the love and hope there, and felt her last doubts melt away. Yes. This is what I want. He is what I want. They got the license with help from a sympathetic clerk who expedited the process when Reverend Thompson explained the situation in vague terms about an unwanted suitor pursuing a young woman. An hour later, Helena stood in the small church beside Donovan, with Reverend Thompson's wife as witness, and spoke vows that bound her life to his. I, Helena Foster, take you, Donovan Nash, to be my lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part. Donovan's voice was steady and sure as he repeated his own vows, his hands warm around hers. When Reverend Thompson pronounced them man and wife, Donovan kissed her with such tenderness that Helena felt tears slip down her cheeks. Thank you, she whispered against his lips, for everything. Thank you for trusting me, he whispered back, for choosing us. They rode back to the ranch as the sun began to set, newly married and facing an uncertain immediate future but certain of each other. Mrs. Calloway had clearly been busy in their absence. The dining room table was set with the good china, candles flickered in the dimming light, and a celebration dinner of roasted chicken, and all the trimmings waited for them. Could not let you get married without marking the occasion properly, Mrs. Calloway said, pulling Helena into a fierce hug. Welcome to the family, dear. Officially this time. The ranch hands had been informed and offered their congratulations with genuine warmth. Even young Tom, his hand healing nicely thanks to Helena's care, made a fumbling but sweet speech about how lucky Donovan was to have found such a fine woman. That night, Helena climbed the stairs to what was now her and Donovan's shared bedroom with a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. Mrs. Calloway had moved Helena's things into Donovan's room while they were gone, and someone had put fresh flowers on the bedside table. Donovan was waiting for her, standing by the window and looking out at the moonlit landscape. He turned when she entered, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. We can take this slow, he said quietly. I know this all happened fast, and I do not want you to feel pressured or rushed. Helena crossed to him and took his hands in hers. I am nervous, she admitted, but I am not afraid. I trust you, Donovan. I love you. It was the first time she had said the words aloud, and they felt like a gift and a promise. Donovan pulled her close, kissing her softly at first, then with growing passion as she responded with equal fervor. They came together in the quiet darkness, learning each other with tenderness and care, and Helena felt the last walls around her heart finally crumble. This was where she belonged. This was home. The next morning brought the confrontation Helena had been dreading. She was helping Mrs. Calloway in the garden when Jack came running from the barn. Mr. Nash, there are men coming up the road, 3 of them, and they look like they mean business. Donovan appeared from the barn, his expression calm but alert. He caught Helena's eye and nodded. It will be all right. Stay near the house. Helena watched from the porch as 3 men on horseback rode into the yard. They looked exactly like what they were, hired muscle trying to look respectable in ill-fitting suits. The one in front, a heavy-set man with cold eyes, dismounted and approached Donovan. We are looking for Helena Foster, he announced. We have been informed she might be here. There is no one here by that name, Donovan said calmly. The man's eyes narrowed. We know she left Galesburg with a cowboy matching your description. The boarding house proprietor identified you from the description. We also checked the courthouse today. Seems a Helena Foster got a marriage license yesterday. You mean Helena Nash, Donovan corrected, his voice hardening. My wife, and I will thank you to leave my property before I have you removed for trespassing. Your wife. The man looked skeptical. That is convenient. Mr. Cowpersmith has a legal claim. Miss Foster was promised to him, and he wants what is his. My wife was promised to no one, Donovan said, his hand moving casually to rest on the pistol at his hip. She is a free woman who chose to marry me of her own free will, as documented by our marriage license and certificate signed by Reverend Thompson. Now, I am going to ask you one more time to leave my property. The man looked past Donovan to where Helena stood on the porch. Is that true? Did you marry him willingly? Helena stepped forward, lifting her chin defiantly. Yes, I married Donovan Nash yesterday because I love him and choose to spend my life with him. I was never engaged to Martin Cowpersmith and never agreed to marry him. You can tell Martin that I am legally married now and there is nothing he can do about it. He has no claim on me. The man studied her for a long moment, then seemed to deflate slightly. Mr. Cowpersmith is not going to like this. That is Mr. Cowpersmith's problem, Donovan said. Now leave, and tell your employer that if he sends anyone else to harass my wife, I will take legal action for harassment and intimidation. We are well within our rights to defend ourselves and our property. The three men exchanged glances, clearly recognizing they had no legal ground to stand on. The leader mounted his horse, gave Helena one last hard look, then wheeled around and rode back down the drive with his companions following. Helena let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Donovan came up onto the porch and pulled her into his arms. It is over, he murmured against her hair. You are safe now, you are mine and I am yours and no one can change that. Helena clung to him, feeling the last knots of fear finally loosen. She was safe, she was home, she was loved. The days that followed settled into a new rhythm, sweeter now that Helena did not have the weight of uncertainty hanging over her. She embraced her role as Donovan's wife and partner, throwing herself into ranch life with enthusiasm. She expanded the kitchen garden, started keeping detailed records of the ranch finances, and continued to provide medical care to the ranch hands, and even some of the neighboring families who heard about her skills. Summer arrived in full glory, long golden days perfect for working the ranch. Helena learned to ride properly, and she and Donovan would often ride out together in the evenings to check on the cattle and enjoy the beauty of the land. She learned about cattle and horses, about weather patterns and crop rotation. She learned about the business of running a ranch, and Donovan valued her opinions and ideas, but it was not all work. There were also moments of pure joy. Sunday picnics down by the creek that ran through the eastern section of the property. Saturday night dances in Galesburg, where Donovan would hold her close, and they would sway to fiddle music until they were dizzy and laughing. Quiet evenings on the porch watching the sunset while Mrs. Calloway told stories of her own younger days. One evening in late July, Helena realized she had not had her monthly courses in quite some time. She mentioned it quietly to Mrs. Calloway, who smiled knowingly. I wondered when you would notice, the older woman said. You have had that glow about you for a few weeks now. Have you told Donovan yet? I wanted to be sure first, Helena said, one hand moving unconsciously to her still flat stomach. But yes, I think I am expecting. A baby, Mrs. Calloway. We are going to have a baby. That is wonderful news, dear, Mrs. Calloway said, pulling her into a hug. That man is going to be beside himself with joy. She was right. When Helena told Donovan that night, he swept her up in his arms and spun her around, laughing with pure delight. A baby, he said wonderingly, setting her down gently and immediately looking worried. Should I have done that? Did I hurt you? Are you feeling all right? Do you need to sit down? Helena laughed, feeling happiness bubble up inside her like champagne. I am fine. I am better than fine. I am perfect. We are perfect. Donovan knelt down and pressed his ear gently to her stomach. Hello in there, little one. I am your father, and I already love you more than words can say. Tears spilled down Helena's cheeks as she ran her fingers through his dark hair. How had she gotten so lucky? How had that terrifying day in Galesburg, kneeling in the dirt and begging for passage west, led her to this moment of perfect joy? "I am so glad I met you," she whispered. "I am so glad you offered me a home instead of passage west." Donovan stood and cupped her face in his hands. "I am glad you were brave enough to take a chance on a cowboy and his crazy proposition. I am glad you chose this life, chose me. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Helena Nash." They kissed as the sun set beyond the window, painting their bedroom in shades of gold and amber. Outside, the ranch lay peaceful in the summer evening, a testament to hard work and hope. This was the life they were building together, brick by brick, day by day. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Helena continued her work around the ranch with Mrs. Calloway and the older woman watching her like a hawk to make sure she did not overdo things. Donovan became almost comically protective, worrying if she so much as sneezed. But underneath the hovering, Helena felt cherished and cared for in a way she had never experienced before. As fall arrived and painted the landscape in golds and reds, Helena's belly grew round and undeniable. The ranch hands treated her like precious cargo, rushing to help with anything heavy and bringing her little gifts they thought might please her. Jack whittled a wooden rattle. Peter's wife sent over baby clothes her own children had outgrown. Even Samuel, gruff and taciturn, brought her a rocking chair he had built himself for nursing the baby. One crisp October morning, Helena felt the first pains low in her back. She was in the kitchen with Mrs. Calloway, and the older woman took one look at her face and sprang into action. "It is time," Mrs. Calloway said calmly. "Let's get you upstairs. I will send Tom for the doctor just in case, but I have delivered 6 babies of my own and helped with dozens more. You are in good hands." Donovan was out checking the north fence line, and by the time someone tracked him down and brought him back to the house, Helena was well into labor. He burst into the bedroom looking terrified, and Mrs. Calloway had to physically block him from rushing to Helena's side. "You stay right there," Mrs. Calloway ordered. "You can hold her hand and tell her she is doing wonderfully, but you stay out of my way while I work. Understood?" Donovan nodded mutely and took up position at Helena's side, gripping her hand and smoothing her sweat-dampened hair back from her forehead. The labor was long and hard, lasting well into the night. Dr. Patterson arrived around midnight, checked on Helena's progress, and declared that everything was proceeding normally if slowly. "First babies take their time," he told Donovan kindly. "She is strong and healthy. This is just how it goes sometimes." Finally, as dawn was breaking on a new day, Helena gave one final tremendous push and a baby's cry filled the room. Mrs. Calloway laughed with delight. "It is a boy," she announced, quickly cleaning the squalling infant and wrapping him in a soft blanket. "A beautiful, healthy baby boy." She placed the baby in Helena's arms, and Helena looked down at her son through tears of exhaustion and overwhelming love. He had a thick shock of dark hair like his father, and had already managed to work one tiny fist free of the blanket to wave it indignantly at this new world he found himself in. "Hello, little one," Helena whispered. "Welcome to the world." Donovan was crying openly, staring at his son with an expression of such awe and love that Helena felt her heart might burst. "He is perfect," Donovan said hoarsely. "You are perfect. Helena, thank you. Thank you for this gift, for our son, for everything." "What should we name him?" Helena asked, though she already had an idea. "I was thinking Daniel," Donovan said. "After my father, Daniel Thomas Nash, if you like the sound of that." "Daniel Thomas Nash," Helena repeated, testing the name. Their son looked up at her with unfocused blue eyes, and she smiled. "Perfect. Hello, Daniel. Welcome home, baby." The weeks after Daniel's birth passed in a blur of sleepless nights and steep learning curves, but Helena had never been happier. Watching Donovan with their son, Seeing his big, capable hands so gentle as he cradled the tiny baby made her fall in love with him all over again every single day. Mrs. Calloway was an invaluable help, sharing her wisdom and experience while still giving Helena and Donovan space to figure out parenthood on their own. The ranch hands tiptoed around like Daniel was made of glass, speaking in whispers when they came to the house for meals. As winter settled over the ranch, Helena would often stand at the window of the nursery they had set up in the spare bedroom, holding Daniel and watching snow fall softly over the land. It was hard to believe that less than a year ago she had been kneeling in the dirt in Galesburg, desperate and afraid. Now she was standing in her own home, holding her own child, married to a man who loved her beyond measure. "What are you thinking about?" Donovan asked from the doorway, coming up behind her to wrap his arms around both her and Daniel. "I am thinking about how strange and wonderful life is," Helena said softly. "About how the worst day of my life led to the best days of my life. About how begging for passage west brought me to a home worth staying east for." Donovan kissed her temple. "Any regrets? Do you ever wish you had made it to California?" "Not for a single second," Helena said firmly. "I have everything I need right here. You, Daniel, this ranch, this life we are building together. This is my home, Donovan. You are my home." They stood together in the quiet nursery, their son dozing peacefully between them, and watched the snow transform their ranch into a winter wonderland. Outside, the wind might be howling and the temperature dropping, but inside they were warm and safe and surrounded by love. The years that followed brought new joys and challenges. Daniel grew into a sturdy, adventurous toddler who kept them on their toes. When he was 2, Helena discovered she was expecting again. This time the pregnancy was easier, her body knowing what to do. She gave birth to a daughter in the spring of 1881, a tiny girl with Helena's dark eyes and Donovan's stubborn chin. They named her Sarah Margaret Nash, after Helena's mother and Mrs. Calloway. The older woman cried when they told her, touched to have a child named in her honor. The ranch continued to prosper under Donovan's careful management and Helena's sharp business sense. They expanded the herd, built a larger barn, hired 2 more ranch hands. Helena's medical skills became well known throughout the region, and people would travel from miles around seeking her care. She never turned anyone away, treating injuries and illnesses with the knowledge her father had given her, and the experience she gained with every new patient. Mrs. Calloway remained with them, moving from the guest cottage into the main house to help with the children as she grew older. She became grandmother to Daniel and Sarah in everything but blood, and the children adored her. One spring evening in 1883, 5 years after Helena had first arrived at the ranch, the family gathered on the front porch to watch the sunset. Daniel, now 4 years old, was teaching his 2-year-old sister to catch fireflies in a jar. Donovan sat in the rocking chair Samuel had made, Helena in his lap, her head resting on his shoulder. Mrs. Calloway sat nearby in her own chair, knitting something small and soft. "I got a letter from my aunt in California," Helena mentioned casually. Donovan tensed slightly beneath her. "Oh, what did she have to say?" "She invited us to come visit, said she would love to meet you and the children finally. I have been writing to her regularly since we married, but we have never made the trip." "Would you like to go?" Donovan asked carefully. "See California like you originally planned." Helena was quiet for a moment, watching her children play in the golden evening light. Then she turned to look at her husband, the man who had saved her in more ways than one. "You know what?" she said softly. "I think I would. Not to stay, never to stay, but it might be nice to visit to see what I chose not to have so I can appreciate even more what I chose instead. Would you come with me? Make it a family trip?" Donovan's face broke into that smile she loved so much. "I would follow you anywhere, Helena Nash. If you want to go to California, then we will go to California. As long as we are together, as long as we always come home to this ranch, I am happy." "Always home to this ranch," Helena agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss. They did make the trip to California that summer, traveling by train now that the rails had reached farther west. Helena's Aunt Martha was delightful, and California was beautiful in its own way. But as Helena stood on the shore of the Pacific Ocean, holding Sarah while Donovan helped Daniel collect shells, she felt nothing but contentment with her choices. This visit was nice, but it was not home. Home was an Illinois ranch with rolling green hills and a house full of love. Home was Mrs. Calloway's apple pie and the ranch hand's terrible jokes and horses nickering in the barn at dawn. Home was lying in bed beside Donovan every night, safe and cherished and exactly where she belonged. They returned to the ranch after 2 weeks in California, and Helena had never been so happy to see familiar landscape appear outside the train windows. When they finally pulled up the drive to the house, she actually teared up at the sight of it. "Told you this place gets in your blood," Donovan teased gently, helping her down from the wagon. "You got in my blood," Helena corrected, pulling him down for a kiss while the children ran squealing toward Mrs. Calloway, who had come out to greet them. "This place is just a bonus." Life continued its sweet rhythm. Helena gave birth to 2 more children, another son they named James in 1884 and a daughter named Catherine in 1887. The house that had once seemed so big and empty was now filled with the chaos and joy of children. Donovan expanded the house, adding on a proper dining room and 2 more bedrooms upstairs. The ranch grew too, becoming one of the most successful in the region. Donovan's reputation for fair dealing and quality cattle spread, and they began to make real money. But success never changed them. They remained grounded in the values that had brought them together, the mutual respect and partnership that was the foundation of their marriage. Helena continued her medical work, eventually training a young woman from Galesburg named Emma who wanted to learn healing arts. Together they established a small clinic in town where people could come for treatment. Helena would ride in 3 times a week, spending the day treating patients before returning home to her family. Mrs. Calloway lived to the remarkable age of 78, passing peacefully in her sleep in the winter of 1891. Her loss was deeply felt by the entire family, and they buried her in the small cemetery on a hill overlooking the ranch she had loved. Helena made sure there were always fresh flowers on her grave. The children grew into fine young people. Daniel inherited his father's love of ranching and his mother's sharp mind for business. Sarah proved to have Helena's gift for healing, and announced at 16 that she wanted to become a real doctor, not just a healer. James loved horses and showed a natural talent for training them. Catherine, the baby, was still finding her way but showed promise in everything she tried. One evening in the summer of 1895, 17 years after Helena had first arrived at the ranch, she and Donovan sat on the front porch watching yet another sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Their 4 children were scattered around the yard, Daniel and James fixing a fence while Sarah read to Catherine under the big oak tree. "You ever think about that day in Galesburg?" Donovan asked, reaching for Helena's hand. "When I found you begging for passage west?" Helena smiled, threading her fingers through his. They were both in their 40s now, with streaks of gray in their hair and the comfortable ease that came from nearly 2 decades of marriage. But when Helena looked at Donovan, she still saw the young cowboy who had offered her hope when she had none. "I think about it all the time," Helena admitted. "I think about how terrified I was, how desperate, how I thought my life was over because I could not get on that wagon train. And then you appeared, my own personal miracle, offering me something so much better than passage west. You could have kept going," Donovan pointed out. "That spring after we married, when the wagon train started up again, You could have continued to California. Why would I do that? Helena asked, genuinely puzzled. By then I knew I had everything I needed right here. You, this ranch, the life we were building. California was just a destination, a place I was running toward. But you were a future. You were home. Donovan lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. I thank God every day that Samuel Hutchins turned you down. If he had let you on that wagon train, I never would have met you. I think we were meant to meet, Helena said thoughtfully. I think somehow, someway, we were always supposed to end up here together. Maybe that is foolish, romantic nonsense, but I like to believe it. Not foolish at all, Donovan assured her. I believe it too. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children and the familiar landscape bathed in golden evening light. From inside the house came the smell of dinner cooking. One of the ranch hands was playing a harmonica somewhere, the music drifting sweet and clear on the summer air. This was her life, Helena thought with deep contentment. This beautiful, hard-working, joy-filled life. She had traveled hundreds of miles to escape a fate she could not accept, and ended up traveling just 12 miles east to find everything she had ever dreamed of. I love you, she told Donovan softly. Thank you for offering me a home worth staying for. I love you too, Donovan replied, pulling her close. Thank you for being brave enough to stay. As the sun sank below the horizon and the first stars began to appear, Helena rested her head on her husband's shoulder and felt completely, utterly at peace. She had begged for passage west, but a cowboy had offered her something infinitely better. He had offered her a home, a family, a partnership, a love story for the ages, and she had chosen wisely. The years continued to flow by, marked by the changing seasons and the milestones of their growing family. Daniel married a neighboring rancher's daughter in 1897, a practical young woman named Elizabeth who fit perfectly into the Nash family. They built a house on the eastern section of the ranch property, and Daniel began taking over more of the day-to-day operations of the cattle business. Sarah fulfilled her dream of becoming a doctor, one of the few women in the field. She went to medical school in Chicago, faced down skepticism and prejudice, and came home with her degree and a determination to provide proper medical care to the rural community she loved. She established a real medical practice in Galesburg, and Helena worked alongside her daughter with immense pride. James started a horse breeding program that became famous throughout Illinois and the surrounding states. Nash ranch horses were known for their intelligence, temperament, and endurance. Catherine married a lawyer from Springfield and moved to the city, but she visited often and always said coming home to the ranch was the best part of any month. As the new century dawned in 1900, Helena and Donovan became grandparents. Daniel and Elizabeth had a son they named Donovan Jr., and holding her grandson for the first time, Helena was overwhelmed by the beautiful continuity of it all. This child represented the future of everything she and Donovan had built together. More grandchildren followed over the years. Sarah married a fellow doctor and had twin girls. James and his wife had 3 boys who were as horse crazy as their father. Catherine's children loved visiting the ranch, city kids who became wild and free during their summer stays. Through it all, Helena and Donovan remained the steady center of their growing family. The ranch was headquarters for holidays and celebrations, Sunday dinners and birthday parties. The big dining table Donovan had built to accommodate their expanding family was always full of people and laughter and love. In 1905, on their 27th wedding anniversary, Donovan surprised Helena with a trip. Just the 2 of them, he insisted, leaving the ranch in Daniel's capable hands for 2 weeks. Where are we going? Helena asked as they boarded the train. You will see, Donovan said mysteriously. He took her to Boston. Helena had not been back since she fled in 1878, and returning was strange and emotional. The city had changed, and so had she. They visited her father's grave, which Aunt Martha had apparently been tending all these years through hired caretakers. Helena stood at the headstone and told her father about her life, about his grandchildren and great-grandchildren, about the happiness she had found. They also tracked down what had become of Martin Cowpersmith. A few discreet inquiries revealed that he had died 5 years earlier. His medical practice failed, and his reputation in ruins after several scandals. Helena felt nothing but distant pity. The man who had once seemed so threatening, whose pursuit had driven her halfway across the country, was just a sad footnote in someone else's story. No regrets? Donovan asked as they stood on the train platform preparing to head home. Helena looked at her husband, this man who had stood beside her for nearly 3 decades, who had loved her and supported her and built a life with her that exceeded her wildest dreams. "Not a single one," she said firmly. "My life started the day I met you, Donovan Nash. Everything before that was just prologue." They returned to the ranch, to their children and grandchildren and the land they had poured their hearts into. Life continued its precious march forward. They faced challenges and sorrows as all lives must. There were droughts that tested the ranch's resources and illnesses that reminded them of mortality's grip. But through everything, they had each other. On a warm May evening in 1918, 40 years after they had first met, Helena and Donovan sat on their porch watching yet another sunset. They were in their 60s now, their hair completely gray, their faces lined with the years but their eyes still bright with love for each other. 40 years, Helena mused. Can you believe it has been 40 years since I knelt in the dirt in Galesburg, begging for a way out? 40 years since I offered you one, Donovan added. Best decision I ever made. Second best, Helena corrected with a smile. The best was when you convinced me to stay. Donovan laughed, that warm sound Helena never tired of hearing. Fair point. Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if you had made it onto that wagon train? If you had gone to California? Helena thought about it seriously, as she occasionally did. I think I would have survived. I am practical and resourceful, and Aunt Martha would have taken me in. But I do not think I would have thrived, not like I have here. This place, this life, all of it brought out the best in me, made me stronger and braver and happier than I ever could have been anywhere else. You made this ranch a home, Donovan said softly. It was just buildings and land before you came. You brought life and love and purpose to everything. They sat quietly, hands linked as they had been for 40 years, and watched the sun sink slowly below the horizon. From inside the house came the sounds of family. Daniel and his wife having dinner with them tonight, grandchildren running and playing upstairs. If you could go back and tell that frightened girl in Galesburg one thing, Donovan asked, what would it be? Helena smiled, the answer immediate and certain. I would tell her that the man who offers her a home instead of passage west is the answer to every prayer she has not yet thought to say. I would tell her to trust him, to take the leap of faith, because on the other side of fear is more love and joy than she can possibly imagine. I would tell her that home is not a place, it is a person, and she is about to meet hers. Donovan pulled her close, and they sat together in the gathering dusk, surrounded by the life they had built together. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and adventures. Their children and grandchildren would continue the legacy they had started. The ranch would go on, generation after generation, built on the foundation of love and partnership that Helena and Donovan had established 40 years ago. But for now, in this perfect moment, there was just the two of them. The cowboy who had offered a home to a desperate woman. The woman who had been brave enough to stay. Together, they had created something beautiful and lasting, a love story that had started with begging for passage west and ended with building a home worth staying east for. And as the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Helena Foster Nash, formerly of Boston, now and forever of Nash Ranch, Illinois, sent up a quiet prayer of gratitude for the day her plans had fallen apart and led her straight into the arms of her destiny. "I love you," she whispered to Donovan. "I love you too," he whispered back. "Forever and always." And that, Helena thought with deep contentment, was the truest promise anyone could make. Forever and always, together, home.